Hello, welcome to this Association of MBAs webinar. I apologise for the slight delay, small technical hitch. This webinar is called Preparing and Revamping Your CV. It's part of our careers webinar series for the new year, and it will cover all aspects of CV and covering letter content. Our speaker, Paul Comben, will provide you with advice that will allow you to generate the perfect content and give you tips on how to recognise and share your value with potential employers. Paul will help you generate your unique selling points and spot your transferable skills so that by the end of this session you will know exactly what's vital to creating the perfect CV and cover letter. Paul is a recruiter and outplacement consultant at Avenir Career Consulting Limited and has an MBA from Loughborough University Business School, where his dissertation focused on career management. Prior to working in outsourced HR services, he focused in the food industry and operations management for 15 years. Now his consultancy is predominantly involved in the recruitment of sector specialists across most disciplines. He also counsels employees that are at risk of redundancy or who've been made redundant, and he has a very high success rate in helping them back into employment. Paul's very kindly agreed to spend some time with us today presenting. At the end of his presentation, which will take about 30 minutes, we'll be very happy to take questions for about another 30 minutes. So if you want to type your questions into the question panel, we'll be happy to answer them at the end. Without further ado, welcome to Paul. Thank you. Hello, Paul. Are you there?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
You can, okay. Well, welcome to the AMBA Preparing and Revamping Your CV webinar. My name is Paul Comben. I'm a recruiter and provider of outplacement services. I've provided recruitment services to a wide range of businesses in the UK, private and public sectors at all levels, from process operators through to chief operating officers. As a recruiter, I know the recruitment process intimately, the good aspects and the frustrating aspects. So I'll guide you through one of the elements of the process that many see as the start of the job search sequence, CV writing. People frequently find it difficult to write about themselves, but this is no time for reticence. The job market is extremely competitive, and during the job search you'll be forgiven for becoming sophisticated self-promoters. My recruitment practice is in the UK, and what I'm going to say is from a UK perspective. I think the most important aspect of applying and working in other countries is that you have an appreciation of the cultures and practices of your target nation. However, we don't have time today for a global tour. If anything, globalization tends to mean that what you'll see and hear today can be widely applied. So we'll run you through the webinar and ask you to put your humility to one side and learn about personal promotion. The objectives for today's webinar is to make you aware that you must have a degree of self-insight to best serve your own interests, be that in terms of what you value, but also in terms of ensuring that there is no mismatch between the type of organizational activity and your personal belief system. For some, that may mean careers in petrochemicals or the meat industry or online gaming are not going to appeal. So knowing what you value and the ethos and values of the organization that you're attempting to join may be fundamental to career success. I want to suggest a method for writing or revamping your CV. There's a strength in systematically analysing your career and the skills that you've developed so far, the skills you seek to develop, and what will be required for the future. People tend to be humble. Frequently they don't recognise their contribution to organisational success and are even more reticent to talk about it. So a systematic audit of your experience can help you to get into perspective your actions and the outcomes that resulted. I also hope by the end of the webinar you'll have some feel for what recruiters and employers seek, the difference, the USP that will increase the probability of your CV helping your selection rather than the generic that will be treated like spam. So what's the purpose of a CV? It's part of the written materials that you'll use in the process of securing a new role. Its purpose is to secure you an interview and act as a showcase for your skills. Through it, you can influence the likely questions that you will be asked at interview. By changing the sequence and phrasing of the information on it, you can improve the perception of alignment with your target position and organisation. Now, I'm not suggesting that you include any fictitious claims, but that by taking an informed view of the opportunity that you're pursuing and the requirements of the position, you'll increase the probability of selection for interview by matching the emphasis that you see in the role, from which you'll realise there's no longer a single perfect CV that you can use for every application. There is, however, a perfect CV that you can use for the particular position you're seeking. How then do I respond as an applicant in a timely fashion to the opportunities that I see? Well, I would suggest that you develop 3 core structure CVs with which you're happy. A chronological CV, a competency-based CV, and a hybrid of the 2. These you can regard as 95% finished, a sort of work in progress, ready for you to change the emphasis as necessary if you see a desirable role. Also keep a resource file of true statements about you and your achievements that you can present flexibly as you see the desired positions. An audit of your career history will enable you to populate your CV and resource file with appropriate content. So start at the beginning of your career and work forwards to your current position. There's a great tendency for people to cut and paste from their job description. Unfortunately, this does not give you any advantage over other candidates, many of whom could probably claim similar responsibilities. What I'm interested in as a recruiter is what you did with the role. What did you achieve? How did you approach the tasks? What skills are evident in the way that you tackle the challenge? And what will you do for my client? Will you do it faster than the next candidate? To glean this information and make a judgment, you have to help me as a recruiter by signposting the major achievements. So I think that there are 3 distinct phases to CV preparation. Know who you are. We're frequently so busy that we don't take time to question who we are, what we value, and what descriptors truly reflect our personality and behaviours. Think about yourselves in terms of your work, what you value in terms of your work. Perhaps take a look at Edgar Schein's work on career anchors. Schein states that the accuracy of a person's self-concept builds with age and experience. They come to know what environments and roles fit with their anchor. Generate a thesaurus of terms that accurately describe you. Are you achievement-driven, innovative, enterprising, reflective or authoritative? What words are accurate descriptors of yourself? Secondly, generate raw content. At this point, take time to think back about former positions. Vision yourself back in the environment. Picture the people that you work with, the challenges you faced and the skills you used. Analyze this against some competency headings. We'll come on to that shortly. And see how you've built expertise across interpersonal skills, managerial skills, and perhaps technical skills. Finally, go to market. To increase your chances of success, you need to research your desired roles and the businesses and people recruiting to those roles. Read as many job descriptions as possible. Pull these from the web. List the common competencies sought and make sure you've addressed these in the body of your CV. Now look at the different emphasis that each ad carries, and by recognizing the emphasis you can then decide which achievements to include and in what order you will best present them. You may choose to modify the wording to best reflect how your experience matches the requirement, and you'll refine and align your content to ensure a close fit with the requirements of the business, and then send your application to a named individual who's recruiting. That's the difficult bit, trying to find out who is the actual individual that's doing the recruitment. Once again, you'll deduce that one CV will not suffice for all applications. So, know who you are. It's worth taking time to review what's important to you. Edgar Schein wrote about career anchors. What he said was your career anchor is a combination of perceived areas of competence, motives, and values that you wouldn't give up. It represents your real self. In the context of career anchors, career includes how any individual's work life develops over time and how it's perceived by that person. So I'm just showing you some of the anchors here. And how is this applied in practice? Well, have a look through it and see which of the, maybe research Edgar Schein's anchors and the descriptions of them. I'm going to talk you through some of those in a second. But for example, people in the health sector, maybe in nursing or charities, tend to tick box 6, service and dedication to a cause. PhD research scientists tend to tick box 1 and avoid becoming managers or administrators, functions that will draw them away from their research. So ask yourself, which of these will be your career anchor? And as you can see, as you go down, you know, aspects such as short-term contracts are undesirable, someone that's got a stability, a requirement for stability with their career anchor, medium and long-term stability with internal career progression and steadily rising benefits are highly desirable, just to look at number 4. But go through and challenge yourself about what's important to you. In order to draw the best from your experience to date, consider using a competency framework to look back at previous positions. There are many available, but typically they include aspects such as these. Many opportunities are now assessed on the basis of competency profiles, where employers are seeking individuals who are able across a broad range of competencies. So you may find it useful to use a framework to look at your previous positions and analyze the demands of target positions against your skill sets. And I'd suggest you draw or print a framework for each position and then go through and analyze what skills you've used. You can see, for example, how an operational role would differ in emphasis from a strategic position, or perhaps how someone delivering innovation and technical projects would have acquired strengths in the use of critical paths and stakeholder engagements, aspects of administration and communication. And by assessing your previous positions, using the framework, you can tease out illustrations of your own unique skill combinations to add some key bullet points on achievement to your CV. Do this for each position you've occupied, and from which you'll see, you know, more emphasis that writing a CV isn't a 5-minute process. And you know, within each of the elements, look at the other dimensions that may be there. So, for example, under the dimension of culture, what level of customer focus did your previous role involve? Were there any aspects of quality that were important? Was teamwork truly valued? Examples of leadership, of where you've provided direction, of perhaps fostered teamwork or have led courageously. You can go through and just dissect each of your previous positions. As you've gone through the previous positions, come towards your current position and look at the skills and competencies you've developed in the current role. You need more content for the current position than the previous positions. So look at it in detail. Look at the competencies you use every day to function effectively. Now you've generated the raw data, start to select the competencies that you've displayed and the sort of tangible manifestations of those competencies. Think about how you'll illustrate them to a recruiter or employer. Now, I'm not suggesting that you name the competencies overtly in your achievements, but if you take a look at these assessment criteria from a behaviorally anchored competency assessment center, you'll start to see how even individual competency elements can have tiered levels of achievement. Nor am I suggesting that you write your CV in a socially desirable way. Just that even when you've identified a significant skill, be that project management or performance management, think on and illustrate exactly how you would use that skill in practice. Learn to describe the situation you faced, the targets you set, the actions you took, and the outcomes achieved. Illustrate the style of your management, and then using the key points, start to shape the focus onto your most recent positions. Consider what format of CV you're going to use. You could use a chronological, if you're looking for progression within the same industry or the same discipline, then use a chronological CV. This typically has the personal details, the profile statement, which is an optional aspect, and an employment history in reverse sequence. Current position first, use half or 2/3 of the space available on the front page, and then detail previous positions. Don't include much detail of roles from 10 years ago. People aren't interested in those. But include the details of the organization, dates of employment, scope of the role, dimensions, purpose of the position, your achievements and responsibilities, your education, And you can put in your interests, that's optional. If you're changing sectors, then use a competency-based CV. This is different in that the emphasis is literally on a skills analysis. So you would kick off perhaps with your personal details, your name, address, contact details, email, telephone and mobile numbers, and a profile, and use the profile to align yourself to the opportunity if you're moving into a new sector by virtue of the words and the phrasing that you use. Then list your competencies and examples of how those competencies have benefited employers. If you read an advertisement that is heavily laced with specific competencies and you'd like to try and move into a different discipline or within the same a different sector, consider a hybrid CV. You've got your personal details at the top, a profile statement and a competency table, maybe just some headings, 8 or 12 cells perhaps, and then a reverse chronology career history with achievements, again going to the position, the company that you were working for and the scope. List your education and your interests at the bottom of the at the bottom of your hybrid CV. So to recap, generate your content, write down everything you can from the deep past, vision the people and the tasks you face. It's amazing how when you sit back and think about it, you can recall people and tasks that you achieved from years ago. Record any dimensions that are there. People like to know the scope of the role that you've enjoyed. So that's the numbers of people managed, the value of the budgets that you controlled, and the significant achievements. Typically I'd be looking, or I'd suggest that you looked for 5 achievements for your current role and perhaps 3 for previous positions. And again, you know, achieve a thesaurus of active words that'll suit your target roles. Achievements don't necessarily have to be those that were lauded by the company. They can indeed be interventions that you took that perhaps weren't recognized, but you know made a difference to the organization or to individuals in it. Space is limited, so make sure that each line adds value to your CV. Try and eliminate repetition. People use bullet points to generate emphasis, so having drawn people to that, try and start each of the achievements with a different active word. And then think about whether you're actually generating a difference from other candidates. What is it that you're going to add to the organization that the next applicant can't? And finally, get a colleague or a friend to review your content, to proofread it and go through and reality check what you've written. It's very easy when you're authoring something to generate a mistake that you then accept and don't recognize as such. So get someone to check what you've written. Whilst there are no rules about how a CV should be presented, there are a number of things that I'd suggest you leave out that are superfluous to your application. Within the UK, certainly, there's been a growing trend for people to attach photographs to their CVs because it's popular in some other EU countries. Don't do this. It doesn't add anything to your ability to do the position, but it adds to the possibility of you being rejected. So I would suggest that is taken out. Since the age legislation came into effect in 2006, there's no need to add your date of birth to your CV. Equally, your marital status is irrelevant. Don't be tempted to add any elements of humour to your CV. Humour is very much in the eye of the beholder. Humour sometimes compromises sincerity, so I would keep away from it. Don't be tempted in any sector other than your current one to use jargon that the broader public will find inaccessible. So I once had a candidate who used the following abbreviations in her CV. She was a sales executive in a high-end component supplier to the aeronautical sector, and she'd won orders for what she described as Trent 500, EJ 200, JSF, and LH Tech. And only when I asked her what this jargon meant did she reveal that the abbreviation stood for the Rolls-Royce engine for the Airbus A340, the Eurofighter Typhoon engine components, and components for the Joint Strike Fighter collaboration. So you'll understand that by using the abbreviations, she denied a wider audience an appreciation of her sales skills and the significance of the clients and the orders that she had won. I'm also interested in the behaviours that you display. Are you able to perform and behave consistently under pressure? Finally, don't regard your CV as a finished item. Regard it as a continuous professional development diary. So a dynamic document to which items can be added as you gain new skills and experiences. The job process can be tedious and time-consuming, so having invested time and effort into it, you may feel dispirited once some rejections appear. Don't regard these as personal. They're just part of the process, and you don't know the reason that you're receiving rejections, but frequently it'll be due to competing applicants, internal applicants, known applicants, or a change in the role description. So don't move on and don't let the momentum drop once you're in the job hunting mode. Like a salesman, assume you'll get rejected and be pleasantly surprised when you're not. Be ready to sell to the inquiries as well. There's nothing more dispiriting for a recruiter if the phone rings, the individual that you're approaching doesn't remember the job that they've applied for. So my advice to you is to have a file system by the phone. I've encouraged you to write different types of CVs for different applications. But it's important that when the phone does ring that you can match the appropriate CV to the relevant application. So you need some sort of documentation to go with this. Make sure that your email address reflects your professional approach. So we're not interested in happy-go-lucky at Hotmail or rodeo girl at yahoo.co.uk. Your online persona has to represent your professional image. And finally, always make sure that you control the call when an employer rings. You can use call divert from landlines to divert calls to your mobile, and I would suggest that you do that. That way you always take the call, you always handle the inquiry, and you can respond in a professional fashion. Formatting. The default recommendation from most sources is that a CV should be no more than 2 pages. Of interest, not of interest decisions are usually made on the basis of the first page. So if you haven't made the right impact on the first page, it's unlikely that a recruiter will read the second or third page. It has to be easy to read, so take examples from the newspaper industry where headlines attract attention. Good formatting with some white space helps the reviewer. Make it easy for them to approve your CV. If you've had a diverse career, write a summary and profile. But if you've had a vertical progression within one discipline and intend to remain in that discipline, don't bother. It'll be obvious from your job titles and achievements what it is that you seek. But if you wish to make a career transition into another role, I think you need a profile and summary, and as I suggest, I would have the transferable skills listed. Don't try and differentiate yourself. Don't differentiate yourself by trying to use coloured papers or monastic illuminated first letters for each paragraph or their other diverses. Make sure that the difference, your USP, is included in the written content rather than any visual presentation. There's a common misconception that a CV is something you'll write to get to a finished document that you use for every application. As I say, you improve your chances of success by tailoring your offering to the position you're applying for. On occasions this can mean leaving out some of your achievements just to ensure that you are aligned with the role, that you look like a specialist and not like a generalist perhaps. Get the job description, analyze the key points, add or delete from your experience to try and tailor your CV to be an exact fit for their needs. Write a unique covering letter for each application. And again, a bit as with your CV, you know, if you use a generic letter and a generic CV, well, it will feel like a generic application and it'll be treated like spam. So finally, when you go into market, this is your chance to manage your own marketing campaign. The downside is that you're the product, but hey, what a product. You're unique. There's only one like you with your unique combination of skills, behavior and personality, and that's your USP. That's where DNA meets your skills and experience, and that's what you're trying to convey in terms of the CV. So you need a campaign and you need targets, and you're going to find those targets in the press, on job boards. You can use speculative letters or indeed networked opportunities. And there's no point in applying for roles in which you'll find no happiness. So as I say, you need to think about your values before you start. Know what it is that you're seeking. So what makes a good CV? First and foremost, does it look like a professional presentation? From a recruitment point of view, I will be going through saying, does this individual have the skills and experience we're seeking? Has their work experience been in a similar discipline, a company or sector to this position? And do they have the credibility to be considered for this role? So what did they do in their last position? How did they achieve it? And in terms of fit, are they at the right stage in their career for this opportunity? Will they find the position rewarding? Does it look similar to the last position they held, or does it offer development opportunities for them? And then when I'm reviewing the CV, do they convey their achievements concisely? Are there any worrying gaps, signs of multiple short lengths of tenure, unexplained gaps? So when you're going through, make sure your CV, that the dates tie up. If there are elements in your CV where you haven't been employed, make sure that you put in the activities that you were undertaking during the gaps. So it may be that you were traveling, but what were the learning experiences from that? When you're writing a covering letter to accompany a CV, use the mnemonic AIDA: attention, interest, desire, action. So who's the target? Who are you writing to? An invitation to interview is what you're trying to achieve. So you need to make sure that that you're a good match for the profile that the advert or the web-based job board is highlighting. Your letter should highlight how you fit with the requirements they've specified and why it is that you want to pursue the opportunity. Why here? What can you do for their business, for their organization? Are the challenges that they face similar to ones that perhaps you've successfully navigated before? So have a look at what it is that you can offer. Always have something to add or to comment when you're writing your covering letter. And then finally, what can they expect beyond the job description? You know, we can find many candidates that are probably capable technically of meeting the job as described. But what do you offer beyond the job description? What will you add that the other candidate can't? And finally, in terms of salary, why are you an asset and not just an added cost? What are you going to add in terms of business benefit? Finally, and this is where people very rarely follow through on their commitments, tell people what you're going to do next. Are you going to arrange to call, or do you want to leave the impetus if they're interested to call you? But whatever it is, make sure that you follow through on your actions. Finally, on transferable competencies, We talk about the differences between the private sector, the public sector, and the third sector being the charity sector. Basically, most of the competencies are highly transferable between the sectors, both core and role-specific competencies. But if there's a difference of there is a difference of emphasis between the private, public, and third sector for some of the aspects. But sophisticated behaviours in one sector are desirable in the other. But you need to know the target organisation's culture. So again, research into the role and the organisation, its ethos and ethics, its particular specialisms is well worth undertaking. So I just did a quick analysis of what public sector clients had asked me for and what private sector clients had asked me for, and that slide represents the match. So as you can see, there are a huge number of competencies that are equally applicable between the sectors. In terms of where the emphasis is different, quite often it can be these elements that are around the financial elements. So in the public sector, it's about spending the money prudently. Within the private sector, the profit imperative usually overrides every other consideration, as we're seeing on the high street in the UK at the moment. Lots in the public sector are around stakeholder engagement, and in the private sector perhaps about stakeholder returns. So one is a perception about service, the other one is a perception about money again. Finally, some suggestions on how to ensure that you maximize the return on your MBA investment. Be agile. Look for the next opportunity. Be proactive. It's unlikely that one organization will fulfill all of your development requirements over the course of your career. So have a look around at what opportunities are available. Discuss with your employer their plans for your development and succession. Take a proactive approach. Control your career. Don't let others or events control it for you. So make conscious decisions. And if you're staying with a particular employer, avoid 1 year's experience repeated 8 times, which is something that I see quite often. If you're staying with the same employer, ensure that you're developing and facing new challenges with that employer. Recognize that 30-year careers with an employer are rare these days, and that career management skills are just as important as work skills in the new environment. And as Rosabeth Cantor said, employability is the new security. Okay, thank you. So we'll take some questions now.
Thank you, Paul. That was fantastic. There was a huge amount of content in there, and a couple of people have asked if the slides will be made available, and Paul has kindly agreed that they will, and of course the audio will be available too. So yeah, we'll take some questions. We've got a couple in already, and if you want to type some more, please do. Paul, the first one is, do you have any tips for career switchers who don't have a huge amount of relevant experience that they can put on a CV?
By career switchers, I assume that we're referring to people that are changing from one discipline to another, or perhaps from one sector to another.
Yeah, I assume so, and I think that quite a lot of people post-MBA change route in their career and change sector, so that's probably relevant for a few people.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think what I would say is you don't want to look as though there isn't any focus to your pursuit of a career. And how can you do that? Well, you can tie that together through initiatives that you take perhaps outside of work. So, for example, if you were seeking to switch from the private sector to the public sector, perhaps you were looking to go into some sort of caring environment, I would be looking for evidence to support that. So, you know, have you got any evidence perhaps of volunteering outside of your normal work hours, particularly if it's something, you know, very different that you're seeking to do? Have you volunteered? Have you mentored people? You know, those sort of things that seem to suggest that there's an alignment between your existing environment and the one that you're seeking to move into I would be taking as indicators of genuine intent. So, for example, if you did a degree in biomedical sciences to kick off and eventually wanted to go on and go into medicine, perhaps we'd be looking for evidence of work in a care home or something similar in the transition period between the two disciplines. So it's how can you reinforce your intent, really.
Answer. Thank you. A question from Alec Pearson. In terms of content for your LinkedIn profile, how much should you copy the contents of your CV to LinkedIn, or should it contain different information?
It's an interesting one. Certainly LinkedIn is a growing source of candidates for recruiters. I think it's a valid place to put a good deal of the content of your CV. In terms of activity, though, I'd also be looking for you to join some of the groups and the forums and comment on those. I'm certainly seeing a trend not only in LinkedIn but also on Twitter of people having something relevant to say within one particular discipline. So, you know, if you join in and participate in some of the discussions and have got a consistent thread to your contributions, then that's likely to help increase your personal brand on LinkedIn as well. But I think I'd be a little bit reluctant about just doing a straight cut and paste of the CV. I think I'd want to add a little bit more about my interests and what I was interested in pursuing in the profile area of that as well, I guess.
Great, thanks, Paul. Gosh, lots of questions coming in. How and where should you present career breaks? For example, Robert Griggs says he's taken a gap year to start a new charity and other voluntary work. How should this be put in a chronological CV?
Yes, I think you should put. I think there are two aspects. I think let me answer a frequently asked question first, perhaps. If you go off on a maternity leave with an employer, I regard that as being within your terms of service, so I don't regard that as a career break at all. So I would just show continuity of employment in that case. If, however, you were going away and you had perhaps a sabbatical and you had a year out, then I would be putting in the content of that year. Whatever you do that is different is enriching and is another point of differentiation from the other candidate. So I would encourage you to perhaps put in the learning points, even if they're just about life skills, that you gain during that year, because undoubtedly they will give you a broader perspective on life and the work environment than you otherwise would have had.
Thanks, Paul. Somebody asked if you have an example of an achievement/competency-based CV that we could have a look at. I guess it would be about emailing that round, as they've never seen one before.
Oh, right. Yeah, I've certainly got something like that, and I can probably provide it.
We could.
What I would do is just provide you with a structure rather than anyone's specific detail. You'll appreciate.
Of course. This is a question that I don't know what the acronym means, but perhaps you can explain. What's the real use and accuracy of OCR in application screening?
Oh, sorry. Yes. Quite often CVs are scanned, and there is certainly in recruiters, in big recruitment agencies, if they're receiving CVs, sometimes they receive them via email, but sometimes they still receive them as a posted copy. They can use a scanner and a parsing device, and all that does is go through and looks for the relevant content on the CV. So if you've used copperplate or italicized fonts, that can sometimes deceive the software. So that's what OCR is about, optical character recognition. In terms of accuracy, really I'm just looking for you to have made sure that all of the dates tie up, that the spelling is correct as you go through the CV, because errors tend to have a greater emphasis than perhaps they merit. But you know, if you're looking for a role in a technical function where accuracy is essential, then it's important that the CV reflects that as well. So you know, any errors on the CV tend to be a source of concern. And if you go through and find 4 or 5 spelling mistakes on a CV, it poses some fairly significant questions to be asked.
That makes sense. A question from John Poley. Is it acceptable to rename job titles where a particular company uses strange job titles? For example, one job title was capability leader where the role was really a team leader.
I would encourage you not to rename the job title, but what I would say is, and I'm currently engaged in a recruitment at the moment where the job title doesn't actually reflect, in my opinion, very accurately the real content of the job. What I would encourage you to do is put the better title or the preferred title for it in brackets after the actual title for the role. At the end of the day, it's going to be the case that if you're successful in a role, an employer will write for references, and if you've renamed the title, it will immediately cause you problems as soon as the reference comes back and says, well, we don't recognize the title that was presented on the CV. So that is difficult. But I think if you put, for example, I'm recruiting at the moment a team leader currently that is probably more accurately called a business development manager. I think if you put team leader brackets business development manager, that would be acceptable, and you could explain that both to the employer and the referee. I don't think would be too phased by that as an explanation.
Great, thank you. You mentioned previously in your presentation that 2 pages is probably the optimum length for a CV.
Yes.
Is it okay ever to remove jobs after a certain time period, or indeed to leave gaps if you think they're less relevant to the position?
No. What I would say is, if you're talking about jobs that are 15 or 20 years ago, and there may be some people that have those, then you could put those under a heading of early career and just put a one-line statement that relate to them. But I'm afraid it isn't acceptable to take jobs out of the chronology. So you know, it must add up and it must be an honest representation, otherwise it will trip you up at some stage. And I appreciate that for some people that have had diverse careers, that makes it look slightly less focused, but I would take a dim view if it wasn't a measure of the truth that I was reading.
Okay, thank you. A question from Mark here. Should you add salary to emphasize relevance to your senior roles?
I would not put salary on the CV, but I think I would put it in the covering letter.
Right.
It's difficult. It's difficult because quite often people have been very well paid and are now changing roles, and the employer tends to take the view that, in my experience, the employer tends to take the view that if you were earning £80,000 and their salary ceiling is £68,000, that even if you have the necessary skills, that you are unlikely to stay with them and that there's unlikely to be any length of service with them. Mm-hmm. So it is quite difficult. You could leave it out, but at some point you will be asked about your previous salary, and at some point your P60 will arrive with your new employer with your previous salary on it. So, I mean, it could be now the case that you're financially independent and that salary doesn't really count. But if you're putting it in there, expect to get some sort of selection, either acceptance or rejection on the basis of salary.
Sure. Okay, thank you. I have a question from Peter Zip here, which is about the different people who see a CV and how
Yes.
to satisfy all those people with the same CV. So he says, A CV generally follows this route: candidate, recruitment agency, HR department, functional manager. The things that will impress the functional manager may not impress the agency or HR, and thus will never reach the functional manager, and vice versa. How would you satisfy all the links in the chain?
It's a good question, and it's a worry that I frequently have, because what is the window of acceptability for one individual might be very different, as you quite rightly identify, as you go through the chain. I would say try and make sure that it is easily read by whoever is reading it. It should be immediately apparent to someone that is sifting a CV whether the candidate is in the right sector, for example, or has previous experience that appears relevant to the role. But I think it's very difficult when you perhaps put in some of the higher skills and higher competencies to get the, you do run the risk that some people may not understand exactly the significance of what it is that you've done in the past. And, if you're doing that within perhaps a technical environment and you've laden the CV with an awful lot of technical acronyms, then you do run that risk that the junior will not quite understand the significance of your skills. So it needs to be readily readable, really, and perhaps you can use a dual level sort of approach whereby in terms of the profile of the job, it's you explain the scope of your role in simple terms, and then within the detail of your responsibility, perhaps you put in some of the more technical aspects. But there'll be ways to skin that cat if necessary.
Yeah, it's a difficult one, that. Mark asks, if rejected for a position, is it worth going back to recruiters to either seek to reopen the opportunity or leave a positive impression?
It's always worth going back to get the feedback from the interview, and that needs to be broached in terms that are not combative and threatening to whoever has made the decision, but you are looking for the learning points that come out of that interview process or your rejection. Maybe it's a written rejection following the submission of a CV. I don't necessarily think that it's worth your while going back in if it's just a rejection on a CV. I would take the view, if you've gone for the interview, that it's quite legitimate to go back and ask for the feedback from the interview and see whether there are any learning points that come from that. But really treat it as a sales campaign. It is I've certainly had examples of very well qualified people in blue chip businesses having to go through many applications to find 2 or 3 offers in businesses that worked both ways, i.e. he was a suitable candidate for the client, and also that client actually represented something worthwhile on his career progression. So it is a volume exercise these days, I'm afraid, but luckily the computer makes that easier than if you've been handwriting every application.
True, so be persistent.
Be persistent, yeah.
You mentioned feedback, and Dhruvesh Patel asks if there's a particular method of requesting that feedback that you'd recommend, and I guess he means should you try and meet them in person or have a telephone conversation?
Well, I think as a general comment, irrespective of feedback, it is always worth trying to get in front of anyone that's involved in the recruitment process just for interview experience. So it's much easier for an agent or a headhunter to recommend you if they've met you in person, and it's good for you in terms of those first few minutes and knowing what you're going to say as your opener, to have done that and practice that so that it's front of mind, spontaneous and fluent, as you meet people. So that's always worthwhile. In terms of particular techniques for going back. I would say, just go and be polite. Treat people as you would expect to be treated, and go in there in a non-threatening manner in terms of your telephone approach, and just say, yes, I'm just looking for the feedback, any constructive feedback that I can find around my application. So, you will either, what's the worst that can happen? The worst that can happen is that you're going to get something that's not constructive, or you're not going to get anything at all. So, if you don't ask, you don't get. But my focus would be on going forwards, not going backwards. Certainly take the feedback if you can get hold of it, and acknowledge it, and perhaps incorporate any learning points that you feel are valid. But move on. There are many opportunities. Keep pursuing them, and try and find one that's closely aligned to your interests and your values.
Great. I think we have time for probably 2 more questions. One is, Paul, what's your view on responding to job board applications, e.g. through an agency recruiter to often an unspecified company as opposed to targeting named individuals or companies?
Sorry, Kate, could you say it again, please?
Sorry. What's your view on responding to job board applications, e.g. through an agency or recruiter to an unspecified company, as opposed to targeting named individuals or companies speculatively or through soft introductions?
My view would be that you, in terms of your job search and the probability of success, is that you don't just follow one channel, and that you do all of those things. So I would be encouraging you to network. Certainly go to industry forums, try and meet other people that are in the sector that you're seeking to go into. Certainly go in with business cards and share your, take the networking opportunity. Pursue the opportunity to network on LinkedIn. I think that's very valid. Quite often people are searching on jargon, jargon terms that will pull you up as a niche expert or an industry commentator. But in terms of applying to agencies, the agencies have got quite often they've got a vested interest in not declaring at an early stage who the employer is, because perhaps they don't have an exclusively retained arrangement with them. But there is a range of ethics that you will find within the industry. You'll certainly find some and I regret to say it, some recruiters have got opportunities advertised that are solely there to attract CVs from interested applicants and don't necessarily have a job behind them. There will be others that have a job behind them, but they're not exclusive to that agency, and it's very difficult to glean what the opportunity is, what the nature of the arrangement is. But at the end of the day, if you're dealing with a reputable business, you'll soon work that out through the conversations that you have with them. And if they're interested in you, it will soon turn into an initial interview. If there's a real position there, there will be, and a real job, there'll be an immediate need to see you and move it through. So you can probably tell from the speed with which they respond to you whether they've got a hot and impatient client sitting behind the opportunity.
That's interesting. Do you have time to take one more question, Paul?
Yeah, certainly. Yeah.
Oh, great, thank you. What significance should we place on qualifications? I've been putting the MBA at the start of my CV, followed by the rest of my education, then career further down. I'm changing my career, so is this the right thing to do? That's from Timothy Martin.
Yes, it's interesting. I think what I would say to you is the MBA represents a significant investment, and it's certainly something well worth having. But probably just as important as you progress, my MBA was in 2000. It doesn't feature large in terms of me trying to sell myself when I go out to try and get recruitment briefs or outplacement briefs. It's not a major part of it. I sell myself on the experience. So what I would say to you is, if you've got a fairly short career history so far, then I would lead with the MBAs. You know, certainly you can put it in. You can put it in after your name if you wish, or you can put it in an education panel that's perhaps high on the page. Particularly if you're looking at a known MBA recruiter, perhaps in the financial sector, something similar. So maybe that's one of the gatekeepers for selection decisions. However, after you've got perhaps 10 years, post-MBA, 10 years, I'd be looking at your experience. And I'm sure that you've met in the course of your academic career, teachers that are teachers, professors, lecturers that are brilliantly qualified academically but unable to convey to you what is of practical use. It's a little bit similar when I'm looking at a CV. I might be looking at a row of 5 MBAs, MBA qualified candidates, but it's about what they did. What have you achieved? What have you done with your career? And okay, maybe the MBA facilitated new opportunities, but how well have you exploited those? What have you done for your employer? And what will you do for my client if you should go through to the final stage and be appointed?
Great, good advice. Thank you, Paul. Thank you for all your time. And thanks to everyone who's asked questions as well, and I'm sorry for the few that we haven't got to. As well as circulating the slides, Paul's very kindly agreed to let us circulate his contact details should you have any questions relating to the presentation or want to talk to him about anything else. However, we must say on his behalf that he regrets that due to time constraints he won't be able to conduct any free CV reviews, which I'm sure you'll understand. Just to follow up from this webinar, if you haven't seen it already, do take a look at our newly launched CV Builder online at www.mbaworld.com. It's part of our new Careers Development Centre, and it's designed to help you produce the perfect CV for your job hunt, as well as there are news and advice, video tutorials and top tips on how to make your CV stand out. Once you've done that, you can also post your CV to our website, so once you've reviewed it, so that it can be seen by employers online. I would also say this isn't the last webinar in our careers season, so you might also want to check out after the offer, negotiating around your next role, life after redundancy, making change work for you, and landing your first CEO role, which should all be just as good as this presentation. So thank you again to everyone who's tuned in from around the world, and thank you very much, Paul. We really appreciate your time and expertise.
You're welcome. Good luck to everyone that's in the job search process.
Thank you, Paul. I'm just going to repeat the name of the website again because somebody's just requested it. It's www.mbaworld.com, and yeah, we'll be circulating the slides and audio and Paul's contact details. Best of luck to everybody.